it was a privilege to work with Suzanne Summers on the show, and so I was, deeply saddened by her loss. Um, I, have a picture in my office with her, that she took with me, and she signed it for me, and it'll always be a very treasured memento, from my career. But just a lovely lady, and it was you know, Step by Step was very much a family show.
Yep.
As you mentioned, part of the TGIF lineup on
Hmm.
Friday nights on ABC, and it was a lot of fun to work on that show. And we, all of those shows, Full House, Family Matters, Step by Step, Perfect Strangers, Hanging with Mr. Cooper later
Hmm.
on in the mix. Everybody got to know each other on all those shows because we all shot on the Warner Brothers lot,
Right.
and we had the shows would shoot on Friday night. They were filmed in front of a live studio audience, and so we had each of us had a different sound stage at Warner Brothers, where our sets were built and our audience seating was built, and so we would have a pre-show meal with all the shows in on another soundstage where they would cater a meal for everybody involved with all the shows on TGIF. So it was a really big fun family feeling, and we got to know members of the other shows as well. That's where I got to know Lori Loughlin for the first time, and then
Mm.
later on she
Yeah.
joined us on When Calls the Heart. But it was just a fabulous time, and so there really was that Miller Boyett crew for all those shows really was a one big family, and Suzanne Summers was a valued member of that family, and so we'll miss her, and we'll miss her bright spirit and all the kindness that she showed the world.
Yeah. Everybody that I've talked to in the past that's had the opportunity to work with her in some capacity, all mentioned that she just really was very generous, had a kind heart, and so I've heard just positive things about her. So I
Yes.
thought I would get your recollections on that. Okay,
Yeah.
as we move into recapping season 10 of When Calls the Heart, which there's a lot to a lot to unpack there. There was so much that happened, a lot of big changes. Um, First of all, I wanted to get into Henry Gowan, which is played by Martin Cummings.
Yes.
And, I've been watching since season one. I've been there from the beginning. So in season one, he was he was an antagonist, I guess you would say. Um, Not the good guy,
Right.
not the good guy. But over the course of the 10 seasons that his character has been on the show, we have seen, especially this season, a huge redemption arc for him
Yes.
in the storytelling. And, Lori Loughlin, her character, Abigail, always kind of seemed to see that there was more to Henry, that Henry had that capacity for good. I think she probably believed in him before anyone else in town did. And when the show started, of course, all the men had been killed in the mining accident. A lot of the men were killed in the mining accident in the town, and the women were having to take over. And of course, he's there, and he was in charge of that, and had a huge responsibility, as part of that. So to see his character grow these last 10 seasons, and the road that he's traveled, and that redemption arc. One of our questions from a viewer, actually was they wanted to mention how good it was to see that redemption story, and him getting forgiveness and learning to forgive himself. And Brittany Goad wanted to thank you for the season, and she said the second part's about the Henry character. She wanted to know, where will Henry go from here?
Mm. Well, thank you, Brittany, for that question. I couldn't agree with you more, Jimmy, and Brittany as well, about sort of I guess you could call the character evolution of Henry Gowan on
Mhm.
What Calls the Heart. Yeah, he did start out as the villain of the piece, and he what I love about Henry is that he's sort of like an onion. You keep peeling back these layers every year, every season
Mhm.
with Henry's character, and we go a little deeper, and And usually it makes us cry like an onion does as well, because there's some very powerful, kind of a spiritual journey. There's
Mhm.
a psychological journey. He reveals a little bit more about himself and about his backstory almost with every season. And we hear sort of, we dig in a little deeper and we hear more of the reasons for why Henry is the way he is. And, for me, that it's so gratifying having been there at the beginning of Henry Gowan now to see how far he's come. Um, we have obviously a town like Hope Valley needs villains, and yet I've always believed that a villain villains are always were always somebody's baby once, right?
Yes. Right.
Somebody's little boy or little girl.
Mhm.
So I always try to view antagonist characters like that through a more of a human lens, because they all have a piece of the truth in them, right? They all have a
Right.
piece of the truth, and they all have a truth about their life story. And so as we've unpeeled Henry all these many seasons, um, to me, it's one of the most powerful parts of the show. To be honest, I will always be biased towards good redemption stories, because I think, I actually think that's what all storytelling is, to be honest, across human history. Uh, the hero's journey, which I've studied, fairly extensively for my own writing work,
Mhm.
um, goes back 4,000 years, right, into
Yep.
human history, and in all the epic storytelling, the great myths of history, the great epic poems, Homer's Odyssey, and the tales of, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and all of that. And one of the one of the stages of the hero's journey that has been identified by the people that know best, right, who've examined human storytelling, very, very intricately, and charted sort of the path of human storytelling. The hero's journey has 12 stages in it, commonly, in all
Mhm.
storytelling. And one of the stages that's been identified going back, 3,000-4,000 years, is the resurrection phase. It's called the resurrection, right? Well, every good story in my book has a resurrection of some kind in it, whether it's a literal resurrection or a symbolic, resurrection. And for Henry, that's what we're seeing unfold. It's a resurrection story in him. The death of who he used to be and the rebirth of who he's supposed to be. And all good heroes go through that. And when you take antagonists through that same hero's journey, it's even more rich to me. And so
Yep.
I'm a big fan of Henry and Martin Cummins. I love him. He's such a fantastic actor. And he's been such a core part of the Hope Valley community all these years. And as for the future, I'm not gonna spoil anything for season 11, Brittany. Sorry about that, but just know that what you have loved about Henry all these years you will continue to love as we continue to peel back that onion and the mystery of Henry Gowan.
Yeah. That man, that's fantastic. Speaking of Henry Gowan, near the end of the episode, we see him driving up to a house with a mailbox that says A. Stanton. Um, I shared on Twitter. You shared the tweet that I know I would love to see Lori Loughlin return, and so would a lot of the viewers. And that was another. Um, we just had a number of questions from a number of fans wanting to know: is there hope that Lori Loughlin could be in season 11?
Well, I don't know if you've followed my personal, Brian Bird's personal sort of wishes and hopes, you know, on that topic.
I have.
Back, really going back to, pretty much, you know, the entire time that Lori has been off the show. And, you know, I have a personal hope and a personal goal for that. I don't get to make all the decisions,
Yep.
on the show. Um, we have a brain trust, a creative brain trust around the show that involves, many of us, on the writing and the producing and even the casting side of the equation, along with the network. And so, part of the challenge, for us has been, you know, how to do that, right? Because it's a very complex sort of situation. It, there's real human beings involved in this decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about a character, bringing a character back to the show. There's very real, people who have to make that decision. And so I can't promise anything right now, but I certainly hope that we can go there. And because I just think it would be fantastic for Hope Valley, fantastic for the fans, for the Hardys, who I think, from everything I can see, I would say a really large majority of the Hardys would be all for that,
Yeah.
from my own reading, of their opinions. And so the fact that we have been able to continually invoke Abigail Stanton and her character on the show, in the storytelling, in dialogue, specifically, mostly with with Elizabeth, Aaron
Mm-hmm.
Krakow, and with Henry Gowan, and Martin Cummins, their characters. So, they seem to invoke, Abigail a lot more than the others. But the fact that we've been able to do that the network has allowed us that freedom, which has been fantastic, because you can't just disappear somebody from a community like this, right?
Yeah.
And not at least invoke their memory. Um, and I love that so much about When Calls the Heart, because we have done that a lot, even with Dan Lissing, with Jack Thornton's
Right.
character. He's invoked a lot in the show, and I love that all 10 seasons of the show echo upon themselves, and we get to go back and read sometimes retell stories or find out more about previous storylines. And so I will just say, uh, it, the network was watching very carefully, right? Uh, the fact that we were allowed to do that really fun and cool, almost cliffhanger scene with Henry showing up at A. Stanton's
Yep.
door and knocking on the door. Um, you know, Nobody was asleep at the wheel when that was happening. So everybody was aware that was happening. And so that for me was a very positive step, along with all the other, things that we've been able to invoke. But again, can't promise it'll happen, but it certainly, for me, would be fantastic for everybody, for Lori, for the show, for our cast, and for the Hardys.
Yeah. I really think it's in the spirit of everything that Hope Valley stands for. If she is able to return. So I
It's
agree.
a town. It's a town of second chances. It always has
Mhm.
been, and there are so few examples of a place like this on television that, to me, it needs to continue to be that, and we need to continue to tell stories along those lines.
Um, I know you've probably gotten this question quite a bit, and I've in preparation, I've watched all the interviews that I could find that you've done since season 10 ended.
Sure.
Life Rivers on Twitter wanted to know, was there like an intentional effort to have the triangle restarted, or was that not what happened at all? Um,
Yeah. Thank you for asking. From our perspective,
mhm.
there is no triangle, right? Um, there may have been in previous seasons, right?
Right.
But that triangle ended a couple of seasons ago. And I've often been asked this. Well, why did you guys start the triangle? Well, we started a love triangle because it's a very common storytelling device
Yes.
in drama. It
Yep.
you could go back to Cleopatra and find a love triangle, right?
Yeah.
This is not like something brand new. This is something that has been a tried and true way to move storylines along. And in the evolution of One Calls the Heart, you know, we had another 2 episode triangle in season 1, even, right? Where this new character, Billy Hamilton, comes to town, and Jack and Elizabeth have not yet really connected all the dots yet emotionally and romantically. But when that happens, it sort of throws a wrench in the sort of the the good vibes that they did have. And so, it's been done before, but really through the first 5 seasons of the show, it was a courtship show between Jack and Elizabeth. It took us 5 seasons to get them married. And then, everybody knows that, Jack Thornton died at the end of season 5. And, Dan Lissing, who we love and still love, it was his choice to leave the show at that point. So that was the only way that we could make that happen. So then, in trying to re-envision what a love story could look like for Elizabeth in Hope Valley, the idea came up, well, what if it's not just one bachelor that comes to town, one eligible bachelor that comes to town? What if there's 2 very likable, very eligible bachelors who could very much fit the bill for Elizabeth? And let's play with that for a while. Well, we did that for a few seasons and let that sort of roll through. And so when that triangle was over, it was over, right? And the love story between Lucas and Elizabeth, which I'm sure there's more questions that you'll have about that as well, but that was very much in our minds a real thing, right? That love story was a very real love story. That doesn't mean life goes in a straight line, though, right?
Right.
For any of us, none of us have a life that goes in a straight line. There's always going to be complications and curveballs that get thrown at us, that life throws at us, that we have to deal with. And so we, by no means was there any attempt to restart the triangle in season 10. Not at all. Not at all. And in our minds, when folks get to see season 11, there's no love triangle in season 11. So the fact that Hardy's saw that or derived that from what they saw in season 10, I think was not our intention for them to feel that way. Nathan and Elizabeth developed a really powerful friendship, and they truly got past the awkward feelings from the previous near miss relationship that they had, to becoming people that care about each other. Elizabeth is Allie's school teacher, so there's a natural reason for Allie's now adoptive father to come into relationship with Elizabeth. But we saw it plainly as a powerful friendship, not a love story, right? Not a reemerging love story. Now, where it goes in the future, we're not going to say, but for season 10, there was no in our minds, no hint of that. Now, if people see that, that's a different story, but it's not what was intended. And and I found that through all the seasons, the Hardys will see what they want to see out of things, right? And that's the way we all watch. Stories and television and films. We view things through our own worldview, right? And our own needs and desires. And so if some people saw the triangle reemerging, I think it was coming out because of their own, take on the situation, as opposed to what was intended in the storyline. So no more triangles coming.
I think that Aaron and Kevin have a lot of chemistry together in terms of their acting. And I think there's a lot of chemistry there. Do you think maybe some fans were reading? I mean, just even though they were being presented as friends, maybe some of the chemistry they have acting as actors, maybe that could have, uh, shown to the point where maybe they thought there could be a triangle that was being reignited.
Yeah, I do think uh, Aaron and Kevin have chemistry. I think Aaron and Chris have chemistry as
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
I think Aaron
Absolutely.
has chemistry with everybody that she comes into contact with because she's such a talented actress.
She
And
is.
so what I think the Hardys saw in Kevin McGarry and as Nathan Grant on the show over really the last couple of seasons, to be honest, is that I think he has blossomed personally. That character has blossomed. I don't think that has anything to do with Elizabeth. I think it's all about him sort of, he became a father, right? This was he was very much the Gary Cooper sort of archetype when he came to Hope Valley, man of few words, the quiet man. And, for the longest time, in the first few seasons that he was in Hope Valley, I think that was sort of his archetype. But I think becoming a father, becoming more of a friend to people, was a result of him sort of that character blooming. Now it's the actor, but it's also it's actually the storytelling too. It's the writing that happens there, and that allows that or to brings that to bear. And I think Nathan Grant became eminently likable, for all of us. He's very funny, and
Mhm.
but he's very charming. And the charm we didn't necessarily see for, completely, when he was in Hope Valley the first two seasons. So, I think we're starting to see that. And I think that, and so again, I go back to the aspirations that everybody brings to the table, like the viewers. We all bring our own aspirations and our own wish fulfillment to the table. So I think people begin to lean into what they hope can happen, right? And when you
Right.
do that, you can see evidence that you will take back yourself and feel good about. And so I think that's part of the psychology of how the show works. It's much of it is wish fulfillment, right? We all want a place like Hope Valley. We all want a place that's safe, that feels a place where people like us. We that this is how I think life was more for folks of previous generations, where they lived in small towns and everybody knew their names, and
Yeah.
there was a sense of connection and family. Really, whole towns become family to one another, and that's what we have tried to do with Hope Valley from the beginning. We wanted to make this place a place that the audience would desire to visit every week, and it maybe even more so would like to live there themselves if they could, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's the power of the town. It's this show has always been about more than just a romantic couple, right? Now, I'm
Right.
not saying that's not important, but for me, the whole palette, the whole canvas that we're painting on is the true star of the show. That whole community is the true star of When Calls the Heart. And they're all important characters. All storylines are important. All storylines are necessary for the whole thing, to me, to become a place where we would all want to go live or visit sometime.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's my take on the blossoming of Nathan Grant, right? So it has nothing to do with a love story. I mean, he's sort of a three-time loser at love right now.
Yeah.
So it's more about his place in the community, right?
Right. Okay. Happy Hardy on Twitter said, "Thank you for a wonderful season," and she would love to have any information or bits of information you might could share on season 11, where things may move forward as far as Nathan and Elizabeth. And I know maybe not, you can't share a whole lot about anything concerning them together, but what can they expect for those characters in season 11 moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that Erin herself has probably said more than any of us about what she sees coming
She did, yes.
in her interview on Entertainment Tonight. And so,
Right.
what I can say is that I think there's for Lucas and Nathan and Elizabeth, there is much hope for fulfillment for all of them in season 11. And it's a an episode that will continue, I mean a season that will continue to be about the importance of community. And I've already spoiled this elsewhere, so I will say there will be a wedding. I'm just not going to promise whose wedding it is.
Who may be involved?
Yes.
Well, that's plenty enough to leave them hanging with anticipation.
Yes, and I do think that if Happy Hardy, thank you for that question. If you have loved When Calls the Heart in season 10 and all the previous seasons as well, you will not be disappointed in the show. As again, I'll reiterate that for me, this show is medicine.
Yep.
It's medicine for the culture. And if everybody else is feeding us a diet of razor blades and broken glass, because that's much of what else is out there. I mean, I watch a lot of different, content across all the platforms just to see what's happening out there. And it's very cynical out there. I mean, the culture is very cynical. And I truly believe that this show is like soul food. It's not razor blades and broken glass. And maybe some parties feel that way after some of the events of season 10. I will just say to them, we're sorry you feel that way. But compared with everything else that's out there, this is an oasis. This show is an oasis of good vibes and good values and good spirit and good virtues. And where else can you find goodness like this on television? I mean, there are a few places, but it's very rare. So for Happy Hardy and for all the others who, did or did not like season 10, but who have loved the show, there's lots of reasons to continue watching. Just because they may not have gotten the one thing that they wanted doesn't mean there are 100 other reasons to watch the show and to enjoy the show.
Right. Okay. Our next one was Carolyn from Twitter. Now, she didn't necessarily have a question, but she did want to thank you for a great season and for all the hard work that's done by yourself and all the producers and actors. And so she said she was looking forward to season 11 with a lot of anticipation.
Wonderful.
Okay. A Lousland on Twitter wanted to know if maybe you could touch on what happened with May and Nathan, which apparently I think happened off screen when the series returned this season.
Yeah, that part of the trial and error for Nathan in his love life, sort of once he realized that he and Elizabeth were not going to be able to move forward, a couple seasons ago, was sort of for him, the personal justification of, okay, well, what is my life going to be like in Hope Valley? And, he's a busy man. He's out there, doing his rounds around the community and the nearby, communities. He's a very busy man. There's not a lot of time for extracurricular activities for the lone lawman in town, even though Bill Avery is sort of a lawman, ex officio lawman. And so, for Nathan, for his character, these journeys have been all about trying to figure out, okay, what is my life outside of being a Mountie? I'm a dad now, and I'm trying to do my best by Allie. But I think, at the back of his mind, he knows that Allie needs a female influence in her life. And so, these near misses that he's had with May, with Faith, I think for him has been about exploring, the non-Mountie side of his life, mostly for Alec, right? Mostly
Right.
thinking that I need to provide a more of a full family for Allie to grow up in. And so I think these flirtations or these sticking his toe in the water of his love life have really been about that, but also, as I mentioned, he's begun to blossom. He's begun to be more vulnerable, and I think those vulnerabilities are part of that journey for him. He wants to find the right mate, right?
Right.
And so neither of these things have worked out, but it's been mutual. It's been mutual. And I think that, in our minds, we had a different, a different destination for Mesu as we moved into season 10. And so essentially the near miss that happened between them sort of happened in between seasons. And then we just sort of talk about it as sort of in hindsight. And sometimes the show has to do those things. We've had to do that with some other, characters that have left the show. So we have to explain, okay, well, where are they? So sometimes you can still do that as well to sort of fill in the gaps in between seasons. One of the things that some of our viewers may not realize is that, we're not shooting for about a 7 to 8 month period of time, right? The show, right, there's a big gap in the shooting schedule. And so part of the challenge for us is figuring out how to, when we have cliffhangers, is how far out to go when we start the next season. Or if you end on a cliffhanger and you want a resolution of that cliffhanger, sometimes if you start out a ways, a month or two or whatever, well, the cliffhanger has lost its hang, right? Yeah. So, and so sometimes that's a way also to skip some stones past some of the story elements that need to be clarified, but necessarily don't get a whole storyline, connected to them.
Right. I would think this season, with you already knowing that there was going to be a season 11, does that make it easier, story-wise telling for you to have those types of cliffhangers to end on because you already know you're coming back?
It does. It does. How it helps the most is when you're building season 10, you're thinking ahead about the implications already for season 11, because right, we knew we would be getting to that. And so we were able to start the writing process. One of the reasons why we were able to continue filming with the strikes on is that we had gotten almost 10 of the 12 episodes done script-wise before we started shooting them. And all that homework also helped us to make the case for let us go into production, get on an interim agreement with the Screen Actors Guild, and they did. They agreed with us to let us do that. And it was because we had so much work done on the season already. And part of why we were able to do that is that we knew season 11 was already ordered. And so we were able to build season 10 with an eye on what we wanted to do in season 11. So some of the homework for season 11 was already established in the storytelling for season 10.
Right. Which makes perfect sense. Mary Ann on Twitter wanted to know, was there any reason that she should not have hope for Nathan and Elizabeth moving into season 11?
Um, that's a really good question. Well, obviously, I can't give away
Right.
what's going to happen in season 11. Um, but I would say that the this friendship, this beautiful friendship, and I really do see it that way. Maybe others
Yep.
will say, no, you're wrong. There was something more there. Well, I saw it as deep friendship because the Lucas Elizabeth love story was real. It
Right.
wasn't. It wasn't a. It wasn't a. We weren't spinning our wheels on it. It was a real thing. We really believed in it. Um, and so this friendship that developed, the fact that Nathan could go into Elizabeth's classroom and have that powerful scene with her and say, "What do you want?" Right? What is it that you want out of your life? Is what he's saying there. Friends that earn the right to have that conversation, that's fantastic. We all need
Yeah.
friends like that. We need friends to to check us sometimes, to do a check on us, right? To not only check on us, but do a double check of what's happening in our lives. And I really did see that as what was happening in season 11. They had gotten past all that other awkwardness, and they built a relationship built around trust. And they were starting to trust each other. And so if there is any hope for Nathan and Elizabeth, it's found there, right?
Right.
Because so much has transpired between them prior even to her decision to her to go with Lucas and get
Right.
engaged and to plan their future together. So much has happened between Elizabeth and Nathan that trust, I believe, had to be rebuilt if there were ever to be any hope for them. And so I do believe that's what we saw, was that there was a friendship trust happening between them where they could check each other, right? Elizabeth did plenty of that with Nathan too, right?
Right.
She checked on him like he checked on her. And so I do believe that there's a trust that finally happened between them that was not based on love. It was not based on love. Whether that can be trust that turns into love, well, that's a different story. And that's what, we're hoping the Hardys will come to watch and see if it happens.
The first thought I had when I was watching that scene was where the character Nathan enters the schoolhouse to talk to her about that. My
Yes.
very first thought was if Lori Loughlin was with the show, that very well could have been something that Abigail Stanton would have said to her in that moment. She would have questioned her that way.
Very,
Um,
very smart observation, Jimmy. I've said many times that when Lori Loughlin had to leave the show and Abigail had to leave town, that different characters picked up. She really was the wise woman of the
yeah.
town, right? That was kind of the role that she was, and she was an older sister for Elizabeth.
Mhm.
And so other people had to pick up that that role in Elizabeth's life. Elizabeth became Abigail for other people. Pascal Rosemary became Abigail for Elizabeth sometimes.
Right.
They all had to pick up that role. Jack Wagner became that sometimes. Henry Gowan became that sometimes. So that role of the wise woman in town, sort of the glue holding everybody together, had to be picked up by other characters so that we could continue dropping those truth bombs on characters. And to be honest, that's another thing that I love about the show so much. The fact that there's so many characters who are able to pick up, where another character leaves off is deeply powerful and deeply mature about the way the show has evolved. Because if other characters can pick up where another character can't finish the job, and still get us where we need to go emotionally, that's like very few shows get there. And we're so grateful for that. We're so privileged to have gotten to that point. And it's not just because all the writers are all like geniuses. It's a collective, there's a collective spirit for everybody around this kind of a show, where every cast member, every producer, every writer, every crew member is investing in the longevity of this show. They want this show to continue. They want this community to continue, not just because they want to. Yes, a big part of it is, yes, they would love to continue working on the show, but it's not just about that. It is about this. There's something special about Hope Valley that you don't find very, very often on other shows. And they all want to see that value proliferate, in the world.
Yeah. Okay. Leslie on Twitter, this is not really a plot question, but she wanted to know, when will fans get to see Jack Wagner sing on the series?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I know Jack Wagner would love to see that happen, personally. It's been interesting because, the hidden talents sometimes emerge right, in the storytelling. Like we didn't anticipate, certain people to come forward and shine like they do. And so it's a great idea, and other people have asked it before. And Jack has said that to us too. Hey, when do I get to sing? And it just hasn't, the right opportunity hasn't presented itself yet for that creatively to happen, but it's a really good idea.
Yeah, with him being the judge and his position in the town, it doesn't seem like that would be a readily available opportunity for that to happen.
Yeah, you would have to make a meal of it, right? You would have to. You can't just have the guy pick up a guitar and start. You have to show a hidden side to him, and we did that a little bit with his illness, and Hope Springs, and that hot springs that they found. We did a little bit of reveal about him there, and so you have to. It would be cheap if we just had him just out of nowhere become Gomer Pyle on the show and belt out this big tune. So we'd have to find a way to tell that story, and but it's a really good idea.
Yeah. Brittany wanted to know, first she said thank you for the season, and she wanted to know, how do you guys decide what the story arc? There's generally the story arc that includes the town as a whole. How do you decide what that's going to be from season to season?
Well, yeah, it's a really good question, Brittany. It's a discovery process sometimes for the writers, and we generally know we need, because Henry Gowan is basically redeemed now. It'd be hard to see him become the villain again, backslide and become the villain.
Yep.
So we sort of need new villains to show up, and so in order to create a crisis of some kind, right, that the town has to rally against or rally to fight. And so, part of it, we know we need some external threat to the town so that everybody can rally around that. And so season 10 was an interesting case study in this, because when the writers were first spitballing what the very first sort of creative uh conversations that they all had together were around, we need to do something fun for the town, right? And so Leslie is sorry, not Leslie, Lindsay has talked about the initial instinct was, what if there was a ski resort like that they could go to?
Mhm.
And then that sort of became impractical, because we shoot the whole show on a 100-acre ranch. We very
Right.
rarely ever have to leave that ranch to make the show, and so that became impractical. And then somebody just came up with the idea of, what if they discover hot springs near the town? And so everybody locked in on that. Well, then water became a theme,
Mhm.
right? And so this sort of diverting the water issue of an outside threat, because little towns can't survive without a source of water. They die, right? And that's happened to countless towns in North America forever. They go bye-bye if the water is diverted. That Hope Springs then turned into this, okay, what about water as an issue? Like, and then the very famous movie in Los Angeles, based around Los Angeles, called Chinatown, which dealt with water issues in Los Angeles, as Los Angeles was just exploding. The need for water was acute, and so that's when the California Aqueduct was built to bring
Mhm.
water from the Sierra Mountains to Southern California. And Chinatown was all about the water wars, and so there was some good sort of inspiration out of Chinatown for this as well. And then it sort of emerged, and then even all the way down to the details of the healing aspect of water. Well, water does heal, right? We all need water. We can't survive without water. It flushes us out. It helps us, and it also baptizes us, right?
Mhm.
And so all of this sort of is a discovery process, and as the writers are beginning to work more and more on the upcoming episodes, one thread can sometimes open up a whole vista of storytelling for them. And that's what that became this year. And so yes, at the beginning there are some super arcs that we planned for the whole season. Like, what's the one big super arc for the whole season?
Mhm.
And then there are character arcs that are planned. What's going to happen to Elizabeth and Lucas? And as the big super arc emerged with the water troubles and the fact of this coming election and a corrupt governor, all of a sudden the Elizabeth and Lucas character arc for the season began to dovetail with the bigger super arc. And it became clear that if we're following, and this is a way bigger answer than Brittany asked, but if we're following Lucas and Elizabeth, those people, right, that we've
Right.
established in this town, and who they are and how they roll and how they see the world, and what their purpose in life is and what their destiny is. It became very clear to us that it's probably likely that they're gonna be diverted, right? Emotionally, they're going to be diverted because of who they are, but also because of this big super arc. So it's all connected, right? It's all connected.
Right.
It's not a binary choice. It's a more complex sort of web that is woven of the creative and of storytelling, and all the implications are connected between all these storylines.
Right. I asked a question on Twitter for Hardys to let me know what led them to start watching the show, how they
Mm.
began watching. And while I did include you in that, I know you're really busy, so I don't know if you've had opportunity to read any of that or not. But when people respond with stories like they were going through a very difficult period, they were really depressed, and they begin watching the show and how the show helped them through whatever
Mhm.
it was they were going through. What is that like for you as
Oh
a
my
creator?
gosh. I can't tell you how meaningful that is to hear that. It never gets old to my ears to hear that story. You know, not all the Hardys have been able to participate yet in our Hardy's family reunions up in
Right.
Vancouver, but we just had one last month. The seventh one we've had 7 across 10 years. That's pretty good given COVID and all
Yeah.
that stuff. Um, and we always try to start the weekend out on a Friday night with some share time. And we're in a big ballroom in a hotel, and we have volunteers with mics around the whole ballroom, and we let Hardys tell their stories. They get the mic and they get up and they tell stories just like some that you mentioned there from your thread. And it is a very common thing that people find the show or get led to the show out of a need, out of a personal need. They've lost someone dear to them. Uh, they're going through a health struggle. They've been in a breakup or through a divorce, or some, or they just have some circumstances in their life that have caused them to need some hope, and they found this show, and the fact that it resonates with them like it does, irrespective of the times when it disappoints them, and we acknowledge that. We don't invalidate people's feelings. I never want to do that. um, I never want to invalidate or condescend to people, and if I ever have, I apologize for that. I don't mean to. We do validate their feelings, but irrespective of those times when some Hardys are disappointed by the choices that we make in the show, the overwhelming response that we get is what you found on your Twitter thread and what we see at the Hardy's family reunions when people share their stories. And I'll just give you a couple that have come. Not they didn't. I didn't hear them this year, but they've come up in other family reunions. There was a group of Hurricane Harvey, uh, victims,
Mhm.
right, where their houses were flooded and they were in a Red Cross shelter in Houston, and they were all gathered around a laptop watching When Calls the Heart. And uh, I have no words
Yeah.
that our show could be a catalyst for hope like that. There was another group of uh, women on chemotherapy
Mhm.
getting their they were getting their chemotherapy together, and they watch the show together while they're getting their chemotherapy in a clinic, right? That's deeply powerful to me. And we hear these stories all the time of how the show has meant something to somebody. And I was, you mentioned Step by Step, but I was on
Yeah.
another show after Step by Step called Touched by an Angel.
Yeah. Yeah.
It, I was on that show for 5 seasons and was involved in about half their episodes as well. And we would routinely, Jimmy, hear from on Monday mornings after that show had aired on CBS to 20 million people watching the night before, Sunday nights. We would routinely hear from suicide hotlines that told us that their call volume went up after the show was over. People reaching out for help. And we got emails from people and letters saying, I was considering doing myself harm, and I happened to tune into your show and I saw those angels telling their assignments that God loves them and has has a good plan for their future. Don't give up. We would receive letters from people that say they would hear this and they would decide to reach out for help to somebody. Now, that's profound to me. Like that, right? This is entertainment first, but shows like Touched by an Angel that save lives. Now, I'm not saying that When Calls the Heart is saving lives, but I think it's enriching lives.
Right.
Right. And this group of Hardys that started showing up in season 1, we didn't invent them. We didn't create this. It's not marketing work that we did, right? They invented themselves, and they began to speak to us about how much they loved this show. And then, we were just smart enough to speak back. And that's now what we've been doing all these years. We, our cast, crew, we all try to talk back to these folks. We have them up to Vancouver to visit Hope Valley, to get to meet the cast and to in person and most importantly, meet each other. And these Hardys are a family. They're bigger than the show. I personally believe that this show, the best legacy of When Calls the Heart is not the show, it's the Hardys.
Right.
Because they're a force for good in the world. And I believe in them. And some of them may not always be happy with us, but they're still family. And it makes me sad when I hear them say, well, I'm done, right? Because they don't like something. Well, you can be done with the show. God bless. It's okay. You can have your own opinions on that. But don't be done with the Hardys. They're your friend. They're your family. Don't be done with each other. This is a powerful legacy of what When Calls the Heart has been honored to be a catalyst in that. We couldn't have come up with that. That's a wave from Providence in my mind. That's heaven speaking when the Hardys, grow and show up and talk to each other. And I hear constantly of Hardys, in their own communities getting together. And I've been to some of their parties, in person and also by Zoom. And they have these Hardys parties every week or so. And these are lifelong friendships now that have been created because of the show. And that to me is more important than the show. Right? Honestly, personally, if we're trying to make the culture less cynical and less polarized and more uplifting and more hopeful, the Hardys are a force that can do that. And we're proud that this show just lit a little match on that fuse, to get that going. And God bless the Hardys. God bless them, because the world needs them. Right? They will need them long after this show is done.
I shared this morning with everything going on in the world right now with Israel, Hamas, and Russia, Ukraine. What the world could really use is the spirit, the essence of Hope Valley.
That's right.
Compassion, love, forgiveness.
Yes.
That's exactly what the world needs. You're absolutely right.
Yes.
And finding that in
you're right about that, Jimmy. The problems in the Middle East right now are 3,000 years old.
Yep.
Right? There is a blood feud among cousins that has been going on for 3,000 years. And I love Israel. I love everybody, right? But we need more forgiveness. We need more reconciliation. That's a value that we need more of, and you're 100% right. And that's what this town represents. Not everybody's perfect in the town. Characters are human beings. They deserve to be able to make mistakes and learn from them.
Or change their mind.
Yeah, or change their mind 100%. None of us who make the show are perfect. We're just a bunch of human beings trying to, have some fellowship around these values. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, that absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Uh, Carolyn M said, "Thank you for a wonderful season and a wonderful show." Um, Not really a comment there. I thought this was an interesting question. Nikki on Twitter wanted to know, one of the titles of the episodes was called "What Is and What Should Never Be." Oh,
Mhm.
what is, what was, yeah, that's what is and what should never be. She
Mm.
wanted to know what was the what is and what was the
Oh.
what should never be.
Wow, I'd have to do a little homework on that. Um, I haven't been in the writing room since the early days of this, since the first couple
Mhm.
seasons of the show, because I'm an executive producer and co-owner in the show, so I was able to kick myself upstairs and not have to do all the hard work myself
Yeah.
like I did in the early days. But I will ask. I don't know.
Okay.
I
I,
don't
I thought it
know.
was a fascinating question. It never really crossed my mind,
Yes,
what to think about the
we
title.
there have been different seasons of titles for our show, like different like seasons of life for our
Right.
show. There was a few years when every title had heart in the show in the title,
Right.
and then we sort of moved away from that and began to do episodes that had unique titles. And so I'll ask Lindsay what prompted that, because that's a great question. I don't
It
know.
is.
Yeah.
They also asked about Starry Nights. Now, I'm familiar with the Van Gogh painting, but I
Yes.
wasn't sure if that was connected to that, or if it had an entirely separate meaning.
I
Um,
believe I believe it was. Yes, I
okay,
believe it was. Yes.
and that was my first thought on that episode. Um, okay, which was a question from Jillian. She wanted to know
That's very
if
nice.
Starry Nights, what it
Yeah.
meant, and if it was the
Well,
Van Gogh painting.
what I love too about the Hardys. This is another value of the Hardys. They 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 read everything.
Hmm.
They watch the show more than once, probably multiple times.
Yep.
They actually they read meaning out of things that we never intended sometimes, right? Like some symbolism will emerge for them that really wasn't on the minds of the writers ever. And the best example I have of this, not from When Calls the Heart, but just in general, I remember seeing the movie The Passion of the Christ, the Mel Gibson movie, The
Right.
Passion of the Christ, 20 years ago. And I was at a screening where Mel Gibson came and he was answering questions, after the fact. And there was this very creepy sort of satanic figure in the movie that was kind of androgynous. It looked like a woman, but with a bald head
Right.
and almost demonic in a way, and then had this baby. This woman, bald woman, was holding this baby in the crowd, like as Jesus was on the Via Dolorosa, carrying the cross, and the crowd
Hmm.
was mocking him and so forth. And she's leering at him. But she has this baby that's old, is like an old person baby. Like the baby is little, but has the face of an elderly man. And somebody said, Mel, that's clearly like a satanic like reference. What was your inspiration for that? And this was his answer. He goes, I don't know. I just thought it was cool. And everybody was trying to
Yeah.
find some theological,
Yeah.
underpinning for this, right? And honestly, sometimes I'm not saying that's all the time in One Calls the Heart, but sometimes Hardys will read things in that we never thought about. Like that, it's fun, it's cool, but they analyze everything so much that they derive meaning that for them is powerful, but sometimes it was unintentional. But for us, that's really special that happens, because it means they're paying such close attention to this, that it's important that we meet their needs as much as we possibly can.
Yeah. I grew up loving all the shows that Michael Landon was involved in, and he
Yes.
had a gift for writing episodes or creating shows that really touch people, much like When It Calls the Heart does.
Yes.
He did a Highway to Heaven and Little House on the Prairie.
Little
And
House. Yes.
I know that Michael Landon Jr. was a co-creator with you for the series. When did you guys realize that you had something really special with this show?
Oh, thanks for asking that. I love Michael, and we have been joined at the brain and the heart and the soul on this one for sure. And so we're partners, on the show. And um, you know, this is Michael's personal legacy. These this kind of programming. His dad created a legacy for him, and he's his namesake too, which is very special. But he's always wanted to try to live up to what his dad did on Little House and Highway to Heaven. And so he had done a series of movies based on an earlier series of books by Jeanette Oke for the Hallmark Channel called Love Comes Softly, and they all had love in the title, the Love series of movies. And I think there might have been 11 of them made. I wasn't involved in them. Those were before we did, got together to do When It Comes to Heart. So, he's had a deep legacy personally, and I'm so proud of him for that. And it's been my personal legacy too, working on family content, like Step by Step and Evening Shade, and also, doing Touched by an Angel all those years. And even the movies that I've done, I did The Case for Christ, and I've done a bunch of movies that have lived and breathed these sort of family values and the great virtues, really, of the Bible, for lack of a better term. And so when we got together to make When It Calls the Heart, to be honest, we were just trying to make a good show, right? But we knew that that the values of Jeanette Oke's work would be there. We very much wanted to uphold her values in her books, because she had a big fan base. 30 million people read her books. And so we just wanted to live up to that audience of one, Jeanette Oke, and make a show that we could be proud of, that our families could be proud of, that we could watch. We had no idea if we could get there. No idea, right? We were in season 1, we were still shooting the show. We were still shooting the last handful of episodes when the show started to air. So the show was kind of catching up with production at that point. And so while we were making the last handful of episodes, we were watching the ratings, we were watching social media during the first handful of episodes that were airing on Hallmark Channel. And we noticed the Hardys. #Hardys was showing up, and they were asking questions of us. And I went to them and I said, buddy, they're talking to us. We've got to do something. And this is pretty amazing. And by the end of that first season, there were 10,000 of them on the official Hardys Facebook closed group that people can join and have a private conversation in there. There's close to 100,000 now, but on that closed group. And the other thing that happened is, in addition to us noticing them talking to us, which was like crazy, we had never experienced that, and social media was relatively fresh. Facebook, Twitter, those were relatively fresh, inventions at the time. And so, but we went to the Hallmark Channel and we said, guys, they're talking to us. We need to talk back. And so Hallmark agreed with us that they would put #Hardys up in the lower thirds of the screen intermittently during the episodes, so that the Hardys would feel honored in that way. Right. And that was very powerful. But it was still, we're building an audience, trying to find an audience. we didn't know whether the ratings were going to be enough to get us over the hump to get a second season. And the Hardys themselves decided to take it upon themselves to get us a second season. And they did a campaign to collect handmade hearts from all over the country, all over North America. And on these hearts, people would write their name and where they're from, but a little message and a thank you for When Calls the Heart. And please give us season 2 on these handmade hearts. And they collected them down in Georgia. Jody Blosser, one of the Hardys, she helped put this together. They collected all those hearts and they strung them together with ribbon, 2,500 of them. And they sent them in boxes to the Hallmark Channel. And the Hallmark Channel gets these and it's like, we've never seen anything like this before, right? This is like the best letter writing campaign ever. Hearts. And they strung them up all through their cubicles at Hallmark in Studio City. The actors got some and they strung them over them. Aaron and Daniel strung them over themselves and took photos and thanked the Hardys. But again, this is why I say the Hardys are everything. They got a season 2. That heavy lifting put us over the hump, I believe, for season 2. So when did I know it was a success? Or when did I start to feel that? All through that. We're just going, God, thank you. How could we couldn't have done this ourselves. This is all grassroots support. And I've talked to many marketing execs who have looked at what the Hardys are, and they told me, you can't buy that. You can't pay money to have that done. The pure grassroots support for a show is not inventable. It's just not. So what you need to do is to keep talking back and talk loudly. And so that's what we've tried to do all these years by being so open and transparent with everybody.
Yeah. Another big question has been, do you know when a season 11 premiere date may be yet?
It's season 11 is still being, the air dates are still being talked about. There is conversation around when it would be the right time. We, of course, would prefer to be back in our normal time slot. But to be honest, it's not our decision. It's a network decision. It has to fit into their all their other programming decisions. They have to gel for them. And our attitude is, just put us on wherever you want to put us on. Put us on. We will find the audience for you. And we're on in the summertime in season 10, and we took a little bit of a hit in the ratings, but not compared to what the rest of cable has happened in cable.
Right.
My understanding in cable is that cable audiences are down by 30% across the board. And if we're down 10%, that's a huge thing. And we're put in summer, when I was doing, working at the big networks on Touched by an Angel and Step by Step, they called summer air dates summer loser theater. Right? That's where networks would dump the stuff they wanted to get rid of. Well, that's not the case anymore, because now new shows are rolling out around the calendar. Right. Every month a new show is coming out with all these streamers and all of that. So it's not summer loser theater anymore, but you have to compete with vacations and kids being out of school and all of that. And so it definitely takes its toll on the ratings. However, 3 million people watched episode 12, our season finale, across the first week of viewing. 3 million people watched it, and 2.3 million people watched it on Sunday when it aired, which was our highest number of the year. So it may all have inched down by 10%, but everybody is incredibly happy. So the answer to your question is, we don't know when it's going to air. we will bring Hope Valley to millions of people whenever they let us.
And when I was a kid, we had the three major networks, and then maybe you would have an independent channel like when
Yeah,
the CW first came out, but you know,
Fox and
right,
CW and WB, yeah. But
and
there
of
were
course,
three or
so
four, original bigger ones.
yeah,
Yeah,
of course, in those days, the ratings it was a totally different story because you only had a few options of what you were going to watch.
right.
Now there is just a plethora of options, with streaming and television and cable, and
The
there are
goal
so many.
right now there are over 600 shows being made,
Yep.
right? Individual series being made. Netflix has its own goal of 1,000 series just on Netflix.
Wow.
So in the age of 1,000 television shows, it's really hard to break through the
Yep.
noise, right? And to get noticed. And so the fact that the Hardys showed up, found us, have proliferated themselves, evangelized themselves across
Hmm.
these 10 seasons, is powerful. We look at it with grateful hearts, not like any sense of entitlement. We're very grateful because we know how hard it is for something like this to happen. And when uh, Forbes magazine and CBS, Sunday mornings want to cover the Hardys, that's a
Yep.
big deal. That's a big
Yep.
deal.
It is. I agree. Brian, I saved this one for last just because there was just so many people that asked the question that it would be hard
Yes,
to attribute it to one person.
right.
The questions, the overwhelming majority wanted to know if Nathan and Elizabeth were going to get together in season 11, and then there was another large uh, base of questions from people wanting to know why Lucas and Elizabeth on the show had to break up the engagement.
Yeah.
Um, from what I've seen from your answers, I kind of made, and if this is wrong, please correct me, but I kind of took it that there were definitely reasons that it had to happen, and that maybe you can't discuss all the contributing reasons.
Yes.
Um, but that it did become necessary. Would that be fair to phrase it that way?
Yeah, there always are. Almost every move we make on the show has reasons that are not related to storytelling
Right.
about them. And it's just because it's a show made by humans, and there are humans, we're all humans. And so there are real life reasons and show reasons, like entertainment reasons for these
Yep.
decisions. But I will say that, and some people have said, well, you told us one thing after, Lucas and Elizabeth got together, and now you're telling us something completely different. And, what I said when Lucas and Elizabeth, made the decision that their relationship was going to move forward, was that I think this is great for the show. And I was not wrong.
No, I agree.
Right? It was really good for the show to explore that relationship between Lucas and Elizabeth, to see other sides of Lucas, besides mysterious entrepreneurial
Hmm.
international man of mystery, kind of a guy, which he kind of has been. Uh,
Right.
that I wanted to see him domesticated. I wanted to see him with little Jack. I wanted to see the softer side of Lucas. Well, guess what? We did. We
Yep.
got lots of those kinds of moments out of the show. And as I said before, the love affair there was not fake. The love affair between those two characters was real, right? They believed it, they lived it. But just like in real life, none of our lives go straight.
Right.
None of them do. We've all had other relationships, or we all have had near misses, when it in the romance department, or if not that, other events have sandbagged our lives, right? Have come at us, natural disasters, whatever it is, car accidents, illnesses. Life never goes as predicted. Life never goes in a straight line. And what the pairing of Lucas and Elizabeth allowed us to do was to go deeper into their characters and find out more about them. individually. And when we did, it started to reveal some things.
Mm-hmm.
When we explored who they were as characters and how they're and what they were and what was important to them, what things were important to them, it revealed some things about those characters. And so we believed in that love story, and we still do. We believe it was a real thing, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't go more deeply into those characters and find out some of the reasons why Elizabeth said yes to him. Right? Sometimes we say yes to things in our lives for the wrong reasons. All of us. And then later on, we realize, well, maybe that wasn't the right decision, or maybe there's a regret. And rather than have those characters move forward with a relationship that maybe had some big question marks, how good would that have been if we would have taken, the storytelling in such a way that Elizabeth would have moved to the big house on the hill and away from her best friend, Rosemary, and put her in some different category, or put her in a governor's mansion in Capital City. Would that have been good for that relationship? Would that have been good for Elizabeth and little Jack? See, when you start to go down these roads, you realize, well, maybe they weren't right for each other. Maybe they settled. Maybe he settled and she settled, or he had other aspirations that he would never have been able to do, and pursue had he settled down with Elizabeth. And it was hard. We don't deny that some people were deeply saddened by the end of that relationship. We don't deny that. We don't just throw that out there willy-nilly and realize and say, well, just get over it. We don't say that. No, we understand that people had a need for that relationship. My appeal to everybody, though, is we would not be doing our duty if we just gave everybody their fantasy. That's not what the show is. The show started out with 47 men dying.
Right.
Right. Life is full of challenges for all of us. Right. And this town is full of widows and fatherless children. That's the foundation of the show. So just being light and fluffy and giving everybody their kisses and the one romance that they wanted. Well, we could have done that, but that's our duty, is to do more than that. Our duty is to give them a well-rounded show, a show that, creates characters that live lives, that are not too far from what the viewers have to live like. Right.
Right.
Want the viewers to be able to relate to these characters, to go through their heartbreaks with them, because what we can learn. This show has always been good at putting on clinics for people on issues like that. After Jack died and Elizabeth was grieving the death of her new husband, we put on a clinic about how to go through grief on this show, right? And there are grief counselors who use our show as an example to their patients, their clients. That's awesome. That's like,
that is
showing a touch for me on like what was happening on Touched by an Angel, when we would hear from people that they didn't do harm to themselves. For me, that's deeply powerful. That grief story that Pascal had about her own motherless, she was a motherless mother now, and losing her mother young. She went through that, her own grief cycle after having this new little baby, that she had to resolve those feelings for herself and get past that unresolved grief. Well, guess what that did? That opened up a door for some unresolved grief for Elizabeth. To not have explored that would have been, for me, that would have been the heartbreak. For us not to explore those deeper feelings would have been more heartbreaking than her breaking up with Lucas. Truly. We don't want to just offer people what they want. We want to give them, we do give them what they want most of the time, right? We have to admit that. Yep. But we also want to give them what they need, right? We want to give people what could be good for them, right? And if they would stop to consider, maybe, what can I take away from this? What can I learn about my own life through these storylines? For me, that's more important than just the light and fluffy, let's give them the escapism. This show has plenty of escape, right? But it can't be all escape. It can't be all escapism. And I understand why people nowadays, with all that's going on in our world, just want to sit and watch something that makes them feel good. Well,
right.
I want that too, right? That's what the show is. That's what the show still is. It's more that than it is the other. So, to me, it will always err on the side of giving people what they really desire. But sometimes we have to do the right thing and take them through a bit of a crucible, and we're okay with that. We're okay if they don't like it sometimes, God bless them, but don't throw out the baby with the bathwater just because you didn't get the one thing that you wanted.
Right. I saw an interview with Chris McNally where he basically said he was excited for this move for Lucas's character. And, he said this has given that character kind of a journey of his own,
yes,
that he can really dig into going forward, and that he's not just a love interest, but now he's got a story that he can really dig himself into for his character. So
yes.
he seemed very positive about it, very excited about it.
Yes, I agree. I saw that interview as well, and Chris is still a part of the show, a big part of this show. They're all important to this show, all of them, and they're not going anywhere. So for any Hardys that think that Lucas, is leaving the show, that's not true.
Which I did get that question.
Yeah.
There was some concern about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he had we been able to post more, about season 11 during the filming of season 11, but we had some restrictions because of the SAG, strike.
Right. Right.
You would have seen him plenty in the season 11.
Yeah. So I'm assuming he moving into season 11, he's a big part of that storyline for season 11. Is that?
He has a big arc.
Right.
He has a big personal arc in season 11. 100%.
Awesome. Yeah. I would think Lucas fans would want to tune in, to see where his character is going.
Yeah, we hope everybody will tune back in. We know some probably just it was too much for them, and that's okay. But what we found when similarly after season 8, when a lot of the fans of Nathan Elizabeth sort of jettisoned the show, we did find that a lot of them were sort of dipping their toes in the water a little bit to see what was happening, and so
there you go.
And we always have this feeling for all Hardys. Hope Valley will be there with open arms for you if you ever want to come back. We don't want you to leave. We want you to come back. We understand if you feel like we didn't do it right for you, but that's okay. I mean, this show, season 10 has been in the can over more than a year.
Right.
So it's not like we could have gone back anyway and done anything to fix it. So, and in our minds, it didn't need to be fixed. It was lovely and beautiful all on its own, all the pain, but all the joy as well, all mixed together. It was an epic season to me. So I personally loved this season.
Yeah. Well, I got a lot of a ton of comments from Nathan and Elizabeth fans, of course, who whether they were returning or they never left to start with, but there was a lot of excitement among that portion of the fan base for season 11. And,
yeah, I think that's right, and I do think that because the ratings, the ratings actually did well after season 8.
Right.
They've been very steady.
Yep.
The last several seasons, so we didn't, a big cohort didn't walk away, right? And I'm hoping that is also the case this time. Again, my appeal is, give yourself some time to get past those, the hurt that you feel, and to talk through it, talk to other Hardys about it. Maybe there's some new perspective you can gain on it. Take some time, but don't forsake the show, but especially don't forsake your friends, the friends you've made
Right.
around the show. Don't forsake them. That to me would be the saddest thing ever. And I'm okay if you don't like me sometimes. That's okay, but I've been through that many times in my career, and we always hope that the Hardys, if they have loved the show, right? We have 110 episodes now. If they have loved the show, and there are some episodes they haven't loved, we hope that they will err on the side of all the ones that they did love, and that they will trust that we're going to continue to give them those shows they can love, and we're going to continue to give them the values and the good values and the good family values that they have loved all these years. That's our goal. Our goal is to continue to do the show as long as people will show up and watch. And just if you've loved it in the past, don't lose trust and faith that it can be that in the future. It absolutely will be. It'll continue to be the show it always has been.
Right. I'm friends with James Lott, who I know that you know, and who has interviewed you
Yes.
a number of times. And both of us, we've discussed how, we are Team Hope Valley.
Love
If
that.
you're going to be a Team Hope Valley, Team Elizabeth, whatever she decided was best for her. So I think if more people would view it as Team Hope Valley,
Yes.
I think that would be a better outlook for some of the fans.
I agree with that. I agree with
So
that. It's a great perspective. It's a bigger picture to have than just being focused on one element that
right,
maybe you don't like.
yep,
And I agree with that 100%. And I always, ask people, well, what would the world like be without Hope Valley? Right. And I'm not saying, we're like the savior of the world. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is that in a world, in a culture, a world with so few shows that do what this show does, it would be horrible not to have it, in my mind.
oh, I absolutely agree. I mean, if the show continues on for 30 years, Brian, I'll be watching every episode.
Well,
So
I that from your lips to God's ears, Jimmy.
yeah,
I really hope that too, because I love what we've done with the show. I love what the show is. We're not perfect, but I think we're pretty good at it, and it truly is a show that had to struggle to survive, and the origin story of this show are harrowing. How this all came together, and sometime I can do an interview with you where I tell you the whole thing. But
oh yeah, that'd be great.
it was a harrowing story, and so the fact that it's here, the fact that it was not really supposed to be here, but it is, and the fact that there is now this massive community of people that call themselves Hardys, and 10 seasons plus of a show, it's for me, it's like a big miracle, and I don't take that for granted at all. I'm very humbled by that.
Hey, Brian, just to quickly wrap up a
Yeah,
theory that's
yeah,
popular on Twitter.
yeah.
Um, Going back to season um, 7 and season 8, season 7 and 8, there was no plan at that time to say we're going to put the characters Elizabeth and Lucas together for a couple of seasons and then we're going to break them up. I mean
No,
that was never a pre-plan. Is that correct?
no. We truly made the decision between Lucas and Elizabeth as a creative choice that we wanted to pursue.
Right.
Absolutely, that was something that everybody said yes to. Right. It was never let's milk this for 2 years so we can do something else. Never that.
Yeah.
Right. Never that.
Yeah.
Of course, in the big picture of everything, you always hope that you'll be able to find story elements that will prolong the show, that will help the
Right.
show to continue. And um, that was risky then to make that choice, because we knew that with how Hardee's had, or not all, but many Hardee's had put themselves into teams, right, around this. I mean, we didn't invent the teams, they did themselves. We invented the triangle for sure, but they
Right.
invented their own teams. So we knew it was risky to go one way or the other, but at some point you gotta
Yeah.
choose, right?
Yeah.
So that was risky, and so was this, right? We're not risk averse. We want to do things on the show that will help prolong the overall arc of the show and the storytelling. But we weren't using, Elizabeth and Lucas for 2 years so that we could do something else. It's an organic process. It happens through a decision making, a big matrix of creative choices, and uh, this decision to reverse field and go a different direction for Elizabeth, uh, that happened during season 10, building season 10, was never thought of prior to this. So,
Yeah.
And it was risky. We know that. It's okay. We believe that it's in the best interests of the overall health and longevity of the show. And if, as you say, you and hopefully lots of other Hardys want to see it go to 30 seasons,
Yes.
well, we do too. We would love to do that. We think it's a good force in the world that this show is here. So let's keep going. And but if I've heard, like people using this sort of Gen Z retcon word, like we've done a retcon. That's not the meaning that they're making of it, of what we did.
Yeah.
Um, we think we know the canon better than anybody. So, for people to tell us that we broke the canon, well, we're the people that decide what the canon is.
Right.
So this is canon. What we did is canon. So that's a fan. Those are fan terms. That's okay. People. I love that people are having these conversations because, good conversations. I believe in the marketplace of ideas, and there's only one truth, though. There's only one set of facts. There's a lot of opinions out there in the marketplace of ideas, but I believe in the marketplace, and I believe truth will ultimately emerge, as opposed to, the lots of narratives and opinions that people might have. But there's really only one set of facts. So we love the Hardys. We want to see them grow and continue, and this show is going to continue to have things that fill their hearts up with joy and uplift.
As a Christian myself, this type of show that you can watch with your kids and your grandkids, and you don't have to worry about the content that what they're going to see or what they may hear. It's
Yes.
extremely rare. So I am very grateful to the show
Thank
being
you.
created by you guys.
Yeah, I have the same. I'm raised in a Christian home and I'm a Christian myself, Jimmy, and so I live my faith. I
Mhm.
wear it like a badge of honor because I believe in it. The When I was growing up, we watched TV as a family
Yep.
because we could, right?
Yep.
And often there were conversations that could happen after an episode where there were some takeaways that we could all discuss as a family. It helped me learn to become a better person going through those experiences. That doesn't exist anymore. Very rare.
It doesn't.
So the fact that this show has become that for many people, for me, is more valuable than anything, because I believe in that process. Watching television can be a shared experience. It should be, right?
I agree.
Good, lessons, good, bad, and ugly, for us to discuss. We should be able to have those conversations. And the fact that people routinely post pictures on social media of 3 or 4 generations sitting down and watching our show, that's so cool. That is
Hmm.
so, I love that so much. And we need more time together, not less time in our culture. You
I
know,
agree.
people off, with these in their rooms, watching their own content all divided up in their own little silos. That's horrible. That is a horrible thing in my mind. And, that view that you have of families watching together, that memory you have, the same that I do.
Yep.
I used to watch Little Joe Cartwright with
Mm-hmm.
my mom and my brother on a 25-inch colored TV that I thought was the biggest thing in the world. And we watched Bonanza, Michael's dad as Little Joe in Bonanza when I was a kid. And now I get to work with Michael Landon Jr. on this show and do the same thing for families now. Are you kidding me? That's 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 as good as a paycheck to me. I'll take that any day over a paycheck because I know the good that that's bringing, to the culture. We need more, not less.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. And Brian, thank you so much for your time. You've been very generous with your time and for answering all the questions. And I look forward to talking to you again down the road.
Awesome.
Hopefully, after season 11, we can discuss season 12.
Let's make it a tradition.
All right, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jimmy. Okay.
Have a blessed day.
You too.
Bye.